Welcome back, everyone. Economist and best-selling author Emily Oster was previously best known for writing a popular pregnancy advice book called Expecting Better. But during the pandemic, she became the face for the push to reopen schools. Her story is one of determination and doing it yourself. Emily joining me now this morning to talk about her persistence and how it put her in a position that she never expected. Good morning to you. Such a pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So your most recent book is called The Firm. You are a parent advocate. I want to talk to you about that. But first, I kind of want you just to walk me through what led you to become the face of getting kids back in school and creating this database during the pandemic. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so if I sort of think back to a year ago now, I, like many people, looked out and saw we were opening schools in some places and not others, and there was no systematic effort to collect information about how much COVID there was in schools, about what mitigation was effective, about how many kids were at school. And so our team started that kind of data collection, and it grew to a sort of very large effort, and based largely on what we saw in those kind of results and what we were seeing for kids, I became, I think, some more of an advocate for the idea that we could open schools safely and that it was important for kids to do so.
So you're going through this frustrating time. Children are being told to stay at home. You find out nobody is looking into this, so you decide to do this research yourself. And all of a sudden you come up with this information that you write this article for The Atlantic, and all of a sudden you come up with this information and you are the focus, and people are using your database as an example as to why schools should reopen. No one else keeping records. What kind of reaction did you get to that? I imagine that was a little controversial.
It was a little controversial, yes. I think because of the nature of the data we were collecting, because we tried to do it very fast, we came out maybe 2 months before other people who ultimately did come and say, actually schools can be open safely. We're not seeing a lot of spread in schools, but we were kind of on the forefront of that. And I think partly because there is just so much fear, there's still so much fear, but there was certainly so much fear back in the fall of last year. I think there was a feeling of anger among some people, fear that this was going to be used to push people into an unsafe environment, which I think was not what was going on. But it's hard to push back against that fear, particularly when it is so ingrained.
Yeah, I'm curious now. The big debate isn't so much let's get kids back in the school. The big debate is let's get kids back in the school with mask or without mask. I'm curious if any of your research has given you any insight into this.
We've looked a little bit into masks. This is something where I think more data, this is always my refrain, more data would be helpful. But I think at this point, particularly given the more contagious variant, it makes sense to have kids mask as they go back to school, because all of the data that we have, the very careful data that we have on schools being able to be open safely during the past year, in basically all of those cases, the kids were wearing masks. And so I think that's an example where we can say, okay, hey, this is a way to do it. And this is part of the really central the really central prevention that we can take to keep kids safe and to have them in in-person school.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a best-selling author. You've tackled parenting issues before. So you've written this latest book called The Family Firm, and it looks at issues for children, school age. You've become somewhat of an advocate. What have you learned from your experience, obviously, as a mom as well? I see some cute pictures behind you there. But what have you learned from your experience that you want other parents to learn from as well?
I think the main thing, and this has really been highlighted for many of us during this period of COVID, is that there is a lot of value to being deliberate and intentional with our choices and to thinking through our choices and the things we want to do and not want to do. I think for many of us, our kids do a lot of activities, and during the pandemic, we really shut many of those down. I think as people sort of re-enter, there are now questions of, well, maybe I don't want to start doing all of those things again. And so I think that there's a value for parents in this intentionality around the choices that we make for our kids, so we can shape the schedules and lives that we want to have.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And where can people get that book, The Family Firm?
You can get it anywhere the books are sold, I hope.
Okay. Well, pleasure having you on this morning, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Take care.